Hey everybody, Rich here at Leaving MAGA, leavingmaga.org. Just want to thank all of you for your support as always, and also for all of your engagement in watching our leader videos, conversations we have with people who are in our Leaving MAGA community. We are joined today by Brian Batts from the state of New Mexico. Brian, how you doing? It's good to see you.
All right. Good to see you as well. Good to talk to you again.
Brian is one of our leaders here in our Leaving MAGA community. So let's just, Brian, get right into everything here. What was it about the MAGA movement and the Trump campaign that you found attractive in the very beginning?
Yeah, I think at the very beginning, what was attracting, I was coming off the heels of the financial crisis, and it felt to me as if a lot of people that had caused the problems around the financial crisis were not facing any consequences, and that made me upset and angry, and pretty cynical, if I'm honest. That I'm watching a system that feels like the people that are responsible are not having to face any of the consequences of their decisions. And it felt like maybe kind of a bull in a china shop might be what was needed. And I think too, I guess actually that's probably the main thrust of it is just what felt to me like unfairness, and this felt like a way um, to kind of address that, to try to get some action taken.
And the conversation was, how did we go from Obama to Trump? And I wrote a comment saying that I think one of the explanations for how we went from Obama to Trump was post 2008 financial crisis
Mm.
fallout,
Yep.
and I feel like there are other reasons as well, but for me, I was just like you. I was attracted to the outsider status. I felt like Trump was somebody who had because he had no military, government, or political experience, that he was the right person for the job. And I thought the two parties were the same, and I felt like let's just let's just burn the whole system down and then start anew. And this guy who came on the scene seemed like he was willing and able to do that. And so I am very much relating to what you're saying, because it was a lot of what informed my decision to support him, work on the campaign, and then just get deeper and deeper into the community.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think if I can comment on that, I think um, I I've come to realize a couple of things in hindsight. Uh, that the idea that the idea of kind of burning the system down, right, and starting afresh, truly just ignores the massive amount of suffering that occurs if you were to do something like that. And that was one of the things that became more and more convicting to me, is that I started to see, I'm like, oh, like there's so many people that are impacted by him and the decisions that he's making and the steps that he's taking, not in a good way. And while people want to cheer about America first, the problem is that it just completely ignores the plight of a lot of our fellow citizens. So we are in a commonwealth. We live in a commonwealth, and so the decisions that we make can either lead more towards the common good, the commonwealth, or they can detract from that. And the more I got in, the more I started to read and learn and talk and listen, and the more I realized that um, MAGA was the antithesis of that. It's an incredibly selfish movement. Um, it's very focused on, like, underneath a lot of it, it's like it's a bit of, there's a lot of like revenge in there. There's a lot of misplaced insecurity, because there are now all these, you know, people and things that are being propped up and say, well, that's what you should be insecure about. That's what you should be scared about. When that's not actually the case at all. And so it felt really misguided. And a lot of people were getting trampled in the process, are getting trampled in the process.
So what was life for you, Brian? Like, Trump wins in 2016. we're vindicated, we're validated, we have taken on the world, we were successful and victorious against the world. What was being in MAGA like for you in your life at the time?
Yeah, I mean, at the time, I was up north, and so I was call it like a red dot in a blue ocean. So it was, a little bit isolating, but, I think when you're in that mindset, you're like, "Well, I'm standing up for what's right, and if people are against me, that's actually a sign that I'm going in the right direction." Um, but I was in New York City, for almost this whole time, and it was trying to make sense of things like, how upset New Yorkers were at him. I just didn't have any knowledge of his history, and now that I know better, because I didn't grow up in New York, but, I now understand why New Yorkers just don't like him, generally speaking. And so, in my mind, I was doing a lot of rationalization and trying to, um, make sense of things to have it fit with my own narrative. And it's very easy, at the time, my media sources were at best really skewed and not didn't really have a whole lot of journalistic integrity. I'll put it that way. Um, so I was well, not even knee deep, neck deep in a lot of that. And honestly, I was walking around with a lot of cognitive dissonance where I was like holding two completely
Mm.
oppositional views at the exact same time, and kind of didn't know how to think critically to resolve those, and somehow felt okay to just not resolve them and just go on that way. Yeah, so I was let's see, there's probably 3 big ones. I wasn't really I wasn't a much of a Fox News, consumer, but, getting into independent media, um, with the idea being that it's kind of, like, outside the establishment, like, that they're going to have the truth, like, they're going to speak truthfully, um, it can be really it can be, it can create a silo, but probably the 3 that come to mind, the Daily Wire, um, a site called Zero Hedge, and, and then Breitbart, probably in that order, Zero Hedge actually started off, with a decent, view into kind of like the insides of Wall Street, and it was, somewhat legitimate, and then somewhere along the way, I couldn't pinpoint when it was, it really turned, and it was a bit of a propaganda machine. It was instilling a lot of cynicism and fear, and then you go I went through that long enough, and I was like, a lot of the things that I'm reading here, like, they're just not whatever they're kind of saying is going to happen is not happening. And that started to create a bit of a gap where I could say, Should I is this is this it? Is this right? Are they actually giving me the information that I would need to be able to make a solid assessment of something?" And it was something that created, drama and created, a sense of, I don't know, like, yes, there's a, cabal that's running things, and nothing came of it, and I think it's because most of it was just a bunch of garbage.
And there were some others, and I felt at the time that I was on the right side of history,
Mhm.
and that, all the media that I consumed was media that was telling the truth. So any media that was not MAGA media, we considered to be Democratic propaganda. And I remember distinctly saying in my podcasts and in my writings that any media that was not pro-Trump and pro-MAGA was, to use a Steve Bannon term, the enemy media.
Yeah, and it's, the one of the most damaging things about that is when you pit, um, an alternative or the quote unquote "other side" as the enemy, it's a natural, I mean, not a natural, but it is kind of like it's controlling. It's like, don't read them because they're wrong. And so it's like a high authoritarian, right, high control environment because it's like, well, I can't read that because like they're quote unquote on the wrong side, which creates this like very black and white polarized view of the world. And now that I'm a little older, um, that's not really how the world works. There is, I think you can get to the truth of something, but there's a lot of gray along the way before you get there.
Well, the black and white is exactly what happens in MAGA, right? It's either pro MAGA media or it's enemy media. Someone is either with us or they're against us.
Um, Very little idea around, because I think I don't know, what to call it in terms of like who falls into this, but there's definitely a craving for surety, right? Like if I can boil the world down into black and white, um, then I can feel more comfortable in a world that's feels uncomfortable. Um, and so it's very easy to cling to that and then want to be able to throw everything through a very, straightforward lens and be like good guys and bad guys, cops and robbers. And like honestly, that's 2-year-old thinking, right? That's we played cops and robbers when we were growing up, right? And there's adult thinking that is, sometimes it makes you feel uncomfortable because you end up having to face truths about yourself that you're like, kind of wish that wasn't there. Um, I kind of wish I didn't have to share that down, but if I don't, I'm just going to wind up with like more blinders, and more inability to see clearly.
That's a perfect segue action to what I wanted to ask you next, which is to take us through when some of the cracks form for you, when some of the doubts and the confusion commence. Take us into your life at the time. What were you feeling? What were some of the reasons that were starting to make you second guess your support for MAGA?
Um, I think part of it was the what I mentioned earlier about the Podesta emails. That was a big one because that I think if I remember right, like those came out just before the election in 2016, um, and then to see that nothing came of it, I felt kind of duped, and I felt dumb for having fallen for it. So there was a degree of shame that went with that. Um, I think I also have had a number of bad church experiences where the church was being led by um kind of like high control authoritarian type person, like almost like cult of personality. And I was like, this is starting to feel very, very familiar to me. That was a big impact. And then the other one was just like, I've mentioned my friend. um we spent he spent hours and hours with me, just frankly, in a way, kind of helping reparent me, um, helping me understand things that I didn't understand. And then slowly started to kind of, like, I'll give you an example. I had, to whatever degree race played into the birther movement, which I think is a lot, or any of the antipathy towards Obama. um, I didn't really understand that, and that whole the dynamic, and coming to learn that and to understand it, um, was very humbling. And as we started to talk through that, I started to understand race much better, in our country and its history and the impact that it has today. Yeah, those are the top ones that kind of come to mind. And I think also, like, I just had to ask myself. Well, I was asked by my friend, you know, like, more or less. Um, Like, do you want to focus on just yourself and your wife and your kids and your family and like your little bubble? Or are you part of like a country we're kind of all in this together? And where I would think about the impact of, say, like tax reform, right? Like, should I only look out for my own best interests when it comes to taxes, or should I be thinking holistically? It's like, well, if we do tax cuts for the rich, that's not gonna help people lower down. So being able to start to get some visibility and some distance to be like, is that really who I want to be? Um, Started to change things as well.
And it sounds like you, and I don't want to assume this, but I want to ask you about this. It sounds
Yeah.
like you may have gone through a little bit of a religious deconstruction also.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure. And that's been it's been a good 4-year journey at least for me as well.
And I'm not saying that for those who are seeing this, as it's not meant to be an anti-religion or anti-Christian comment, just like I know that's not what you're saying, but there does seem to be this, oftentimes there's this inextricable link between religious radicalization and support
Mhm.
for MAGA, that,
Yeah. Yeah.
that it's present, that it's there, and it sounds like it was the case for you.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And there's a lot, like to your point, like there's a lot of different aspects to that when you start to dig into it. I think one of the things that has become um, really helpful for me is to understand that like we all live in a particular culture at a particular time that informs everything, and that informs the way that you would say like Christianity plays itself out in the U.S. Um, Once I started to call like get a little bit of above it all in a sense and be able to look down, um, I could see where my beliefs had been formed, you know, on this collection of things that were very American, right? And very a particular, I don't know, vein of American and Christianity, and how the two had gotten fused together. And I don't think we do. I think it just became wrapped up in a lot of a lot of kind of just gross merging together of particular beliefs with, of like personal beliefs with politics.
And I give you so much credit for being able to take such a long view and assess your beliefs and make that decision to leave. What I wanted to ask you in closing is, why do you now, Brian, feel the need to speak out? What do you hope would be accomplished from speaking out the way that you're doing?
The one that I hope to experience is that someone hears me that is still in MAGA, and that it's just maybe the first, it doesn't even have to be the first thing. It could be like a piece along the way that results in them having the same type of, realization, and them deciding to go through this process, right? Of kind of deconstructing a lot of things, not just on the religious side, but, just the way that they view the world. And when this is the one where I've had firsthand opportunity to speak to someone who's like, they're separated from their dad or their mom or their uncle or their brother, um, that they get a little bit of hope from it. And they're like, okay, I didn't know that I hadn't met someone that had changed their mind. And now that I see that someone can, it gives me hope. All is not lost. Um, and so that's been always really encouraging to me. And, like I'm starting to kind of tear up sharing it now, because it's a pretty powerful experience, to be given the opportunity to play that role for somebody.
Hey everybody, if you like this video, make sure you drop a comment, make sure you subscribe, and also be sure to visit us at leavingmaga.org. You can read more of our testimonials, you can contact us, you can subscribe to our newsletter, you can get information on our support groups that we hold every week for friends and relatives of those in MAGA, and you can get information on my memoir, One Betrayal Too Many, Why I Left MAGA. And any questions that you have, you can feel free to bring them to our weekly live stream, which is at Wednesday, 1 o'clock Eastern, across all of our socials. As always, we appreciate you watching. Thanks for your support.